Look at this, it's Jenson Button in a Super GT car. Just look at his hands and you can see why he is considered one of the smoothest drivers in Formula 1. But is smoother actually faster? Well, yes, but no. Let me explain. Some drivers drive the wheels off the car, hacking away at the steering wheel, and some, on the surface, like they are driving to the shops. And it's two ways of doing almost the same thing. Driving a car really fast. Drivers like Vettel, Alonso, Schumacher, and to an extent Verstappen all drive with more aggressive inputs on the steering wheel, throwing the car into the corner or making it rotate in the middle of the corner. This makes things look fast, and when it's done right, it absolutely is. But drivers like Jackie Stewart, Alain Prost, and later Jenson Button were super smooth, turning into the corner with one smooth sweep, making it look incredibly easy. If you just looked at the steering wheel, it looks like they're taking a corner on a back road on a Sunday drive. But Button was the epitome of this. He was the smoothest driver in recent memory, and he did it really well, winning 15 races, beating Lewis in his time as a teammate, and taking the 2009 World Championship. That was, of course, a favourite year for many of us. Jenson is very open about where this particular driving style came from.
I learnt so much as a young kid in karting when you didn't have much power, so you had to be really smooth, and the whole thing for me was driving as smooth as I could to keep the engine revs as high as possible. That kept the minimum speed up through a corner.
And in karting, this is important. It comes down to the racing line. Jenson was super smooth on the steering wheel, but that only works with the right racing line, one that is extremely common in karting. Taking the geometric racing line is the widest arc that you can take through a corner, one that is as close to a constant radius as it can be. In karting, this works really well, as it allows you to keep the minimum corner speed really high. And this is a benefit, of course, because karts often don't have very much power. And the karts Jenson was racing were two-stroke, meaning they produce way more power high up in the revs. So if Jenson could keep the engine just 100 revs higher than a competitor, he would carry more speed through the corner and accelerate faster on the straights. And that's what he means by keeping the revs up. And it benefited him a lot through karting, as he flew through the ranks.
This is the view from Jenson Button from the back. He's already carving his way through the field.
But in my research, I found this a particularly funny little incident.
Jenson Button, number 2. Oh, and Button in all sorts of problems with Blumen.
This smooth style also showed something else about Button's natural ability. To drive a smooth line with one steering input, you need to be predictive. You need to understand what the kart or the car is going to do, so you can make the correct inputs and have it perfectly balanced all the way through the corner. And the opposite of this is when you're being reactive, when your reaction is behind what the car does. This is when you're throwing the car into the corner and then reacting and dealing with it when it gets out of shape. But this all works in karting. But if you took this line and directly applied it to a racing car, you'd probably be quite slow. And yes, I know many people say that smooth is fast. And it is, but let me explain a little bit more. Back when I was coaching all the time, I actually explained this to a lot of drivers. So I'm going to let Scott from 2017 explain this. But when we're racing or driving on a circuit, the geometric line often isn't the quickest line through a corner. The reason being that after the corner, the straights or the following corner are very important too. On this orange ideal racing line, we apex a little bit later, and it means that this section is a lot straighter, which means that we can get to the accelerator sooner and accelerate out of the corner, keeping that higher speed going all the way down the next straight, again improving our lap time. Now the only negative is that we are turning in a little bit later, and this means that we have to turn the car a little bit tighter. Because we're not on the perfect geometric line here where the radius is constant, we have to do more turning in this period here, which means that we have to turn the car a little bit more. When you need to turn the car a little bit more, it means that the minimum speed in this area will be slightly lower than a geometric line. But you more than make up for this on the following straight. Now, I'm not saying that Jenson drives that exact geometric line. It will be much more subtle than that. But compared to the majority of drivers in F1, he ran a much wider and smoother arc through the corner. And in theory, the ideal line is faster. A more V'd-off line allows the driver to brake late and accelerate earlier. But you're doing more turning in the mid-corner, and that reduces the lowest speed in the middle of the corner. However, in a high-powered car, like an F1 car, getting on the throttle earlier outweighs the benefits of higher mid-corner speed. And Vettel, Verstappen and Schumacher all did this a lot, really exaggerating that V-shaped line in the slower corners. And as I said, when done right with a car that suits his style, it is faster. And this showed in Button's career. On the whole, whole, he got most of his pole positions when he had the quickest car. And when he was at McLaren with Lewis as a teammate, Lewis was faster over one lap. But that wasn't Button's main strength. But we'll get back to that. Button was also known for his ability in changeable conditions. But this isn't entirely down to him being smooth. Button had an incredible understanding and feeling of his tyres, what they were doing, how they gripped in different conditions, and how they changed throughout the race and within a stint. He said, "I enjoy the way that the car changes during the course of a race. And as the fuel burns off and the grip from the tyres changes, you have to change what you do, and I think that's one of my great strengths." And there are many great races, like Montreal 2011, where Button made the right call at the right time, often getting onto slicks earlier than other drivers. Firstly, he had the belief in his car control, knowing he could keep the car on the track, and also in his understanding of the grip on the track. He was bold in the decisions he made, meaning he often reaped the rewards. And luckily, he didn't stuff it in the barrier. In races where the track was drying, he could get onto the slicks at the right time and go 5 seconds a lap faster than the other drivers who would pit later, meaning that he could jump them in the pits. People often put this down to his smooth driving style, but I feel it's a different type of skill. Now, I know what you're thinking. Jenson has a really smooth driving style, but how smooth are his balls? So, getting back to the point, smooth is fast. Well, is it? Because from what we've seen there, a smooth racing line isn't faster over one lap. In a Formula 1 car at least. But that's not all we're talking about here. Smooth driving is about the inputs you make on the steering wheel, the brake pedal, the throttle pedal, and how you manipulate the car. Now back to Button's main strength, the old saying, smooth is fast. But why? Well, to explain, let's look at a driver that is not smooth at all. Maybe like Fernando in the early 2000s. Every time you turn the steering wheel, the turning force on the car transfers some load from the inside wheels to the outside wheels. So through a corner, the outside wheels are carrying much more load. Hopefully that makes sense. Then think about what that does for the grip of the tyres. The outside tyres are being pushed into the tarmac much more, producing much more grip than the inside tyres as they have more load. But here's the key to all of this. The inside tyres lose more grip than the outside tyres gain. So effectively, the car has less overall grip than a more balanced car, with similar load on each of the tyres. So the more smoother you drive, the less weight transfer you will cause in the car. Therefore, the more grip you have, and the faster you can go through the corner. And this is evident in how Jenson drove. He actually braked a little earlier than most drivers, but he got the car settled into the corner by applying steering lock very smoothly, meaning he actually had more grip through the corner. It also meant he kept his tyres alive longer than the other drivers. When you're smooth, you apply one gradual load to the tyre, allowing it to deform once, rather than loading and unloading like you might see with an aggressive driver. This also means that the temperatures stay more consistent and also reduces the wear on the tyre down to scrubbing. And this is the holy grail of tyre preservation, keeping temperatures in check and reducing scrubbing. But what's interesting is that while Button was smooth on the wheel, he wasn't all that smooth on the pedals. His engineer at McLaren, Tom Stollard, said this: "He's very smooth with his hands, which is the bit you can see on the television, but his feet work like mad on the pedals. He balances the car with his feet a lot more than other drivers, and he seems to do it effortlessly. His hands would have you believe that he was out for a Saturday afternoon drive, but his feet were working like crazy on the pedals, modulating brake and throttle inputs." And similar to Max Verstappen's style that we explained in the last video, drivers can use the pedals to balance the car, getting on the throttle to move the weight rearwards or on the brake to bring it forward, manipulating the grip and the balance of the car throughout the corner. And this style in a car that rewarded it, like the Brawn, was unbeatable. That car was so stable, but also had lots of grip on the front end, meaning Button could hold incredible speeds through the corner. It also liked to look after its tyres. And this was his main strength, the ability to drive a full race distance faster than other drivers, keeping the tyres alive whilst going fast, similar to his idol Alain Prost, someone who only qualified as high as he needed to, knowing he had a car and a driving style that allowed him to be fast in the race. But this smooth style was also one of Jenson's biggest weaknesses. He often wasn't as good as other drivers over a single lap, something Jenson has been very open about. And much of this was down to not being able to fire the tyres up to temperature, where people like Vettel and Hamilton could. Hamilton would brake much harder and later, throwing loads of temperature into the tyres just before the turning phase of the corner, meaning he had the tyres in the right window when he needed to pivot the car. In the early days of the Pirelli tyres, this really hurt him. He couldn't get the Pirelli tyres warm in quali, or even at the start of races, meaning he really struggled. However, Jenson wasn't always smooth, and there are a couple of examples of this. If you watch him on race starts, he was often super aggressive on the wheel. And this is because on a race start, the tyres are cold and you don't quite know how much grip there is. So by being aggressive at the wheel, you have more opportunities to feel the grip the tyre is giving you, enabling you to absorb information from the track and make better decisions with corners later in that lap. And it also warms the tyres up too, so that helps. Then there is when Jenson drives GT cars. Later in his career, he raced in DTM and Super GT. And these are much heavier than F1 cars and much softer sprung, so you had to be a little bit more aggressive with them. And you can really see just how aggressive Jenson is on the race starts here. And later in the race, he is much smoother. So yes, smooth is fast, but it comes with some drawbacks. We can learn a lot from Jenson, whether you drive it in the real world or in the sim. You should watch this video on how Max Verstappen drives in his sim. Thanks for watching, thanks to Manscaped for sponsoring the video, and I'll catch you in the next one.